CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. Let's welcome back to CMMS Radio, Bryan Bieschke. He's with UpKeep. He's just a mechanic, and he's here to tell us some facts just straight off the cuff when it comes to CMMS, primarily around implementation, maybe selection. And I'm doing this for Engineering Maintenance Solutions. They're friends of mine, and they support CMMS Radio. They showcase the episodes, and they're doing some stuff around CMMS. So they hit me up and said, Greg, you got some heavies. And I said, damn right I do. And here's one of them right here. Bryan, welcome back, brother.
Greg, thanks, man. I'm going to see you in like a month. We got to spend some time like a month or two ago down in South Carolina.
Yes, sir.
I know we just put you up at Mobius. That was great. You hanging out with all of our friends, Howard and the whole crew there. So it's good. I'm glad we can chop it up a bit.
Yeah. And what was cool about that Mobius Connect Live event was we didn't have to pull any punches. We got really real about some stuff. Everybody found it useful. And yeah, being an UpKeep ambassador and having y'all get me there, I got to hang out with Howard Penrose, another ambassador. And I also had Kevin Clark on that thing. And I'm getting ready to release all the footage. I'm just debating, do I go with the raw, dirty footage that we recorded, or do I wait for the clean audio? I think I'm going to go a little sooner rather than later because all about keeping it real.
Was that your first time meeting Howard?
No, it was not. And Reliable Plant, which you and I've got you on a panel discussion.
That's right.
I met him there last year finally. So
that's right.
Just all good.
Kevin's a good dude too. I've met him at IMTS, I think, last year.
I think you met him there, and I'm pretty sure you've met him previously at SMRP, which this year I'm finally going to be going to that. So I'll be seeing you there, I think.
Yep, I will be there.
Yeah, I got some cool shit going on, but we're not talking about it quite yet. But I'll pull you in, dude.
No worries.
All right, let's carve up some CMMS stuff. So I've got kind of a list of questions, but this is just kind of grip it and rip it style. But I will kind of read those off, and you just boom, knock them down as I throw them up.
Sure.
First question is how to successfully implement a CMMS.
Well, that's a huge question, right? And there's a lot of variables, like depending on how your organization moves, right? The timelines your organization subscribes to, the roles of leadership, and what their thoughts are or approval levels are with things, right? So this is what I would say. Before implementing a CMMS, create a RACI chart, okay? A responsibility, accountability, consult, and inform chart. So you have a fundamental understanding of who's going to do what, who's going to say what, who approves whatever, who's informed, who do you consult with. Do all those things before, so that when you get to the point of selecting a CMMS and ultimately an implementation, you have some information to show to the provider or whoever's doing your implementation to say, hey, this is how we see ourselves. Is this right according to the software? Is this going to work? What do we have to modify? How do we have to change things, right? In theory, a good CMMS should enable the way that work is already being done. Okay? We don't want to change the way you do work just to conform to our implementation or our CMMS. Ideally, right? Now, there's going to be circumstances where either your shit's super jacked up and you're doing stuff wild and we're going to have to bring it in, right? And get some structure around it. Or maybe you're doing stuff super to the point and complicated, and maybe the system doesn't really mirror that in reality. Right? So there's going to be nuance, but I would say that people need to know where they fit and who's going to be making decisions, who you're going to be relying on, who's going to be accountable for certain things. And a fundamental RACI chart is good for those things. Again, the question is huge. So this is just a point in time that I believe is something that can get your feet under you relatively quickly. It also brings a lot of people into the process right? Because it's not just you making decisions on behalf of yourself and the rest of the organization. You're actually bringing people in and understanding who's going to do what and getting people's approval. So it's a good conversation starter. But implementation in itself is a very nuanced thing. And the discovery of each individual business is really going to drive the way you implement, depending on all the factors we just talked about.
Yeah, and I knew that each one of these things that I'm going to rattle through with are really big. So we'll be doing this again and again and try to stay on theme. Not the easiest thing to do on CMMS radio, but the reason for that is I prefer real conversations. Just drop in, let's talk, let's be real, because that's what I'm always encouraging people to do when they talk to potential vendors, potential advisors, people that they want to learn from. Just ask anything and just kind of see what you get. And if you don't know what you're getting, whether you should listen to it or not, I think something happens during those conversations that can give off signals and vibes. I don't know how to advise on that part of it.
Anytime you bring people into a process and genuinely seek out their understanding or their comments or their whatever, you are bound to solve problems. You're bound to gain insight that you would not have had otherwise. And it's likely that you're going to get some clarity, right? I mean, one of two things generally happens when you have these conversations. Either you learn something or they learn something. And either way, you both win.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why, I say this stuff about asking hard questions. What I mean by that is direct questions. And you can oftentimes intuit or use your gut to figure out what's going on. If somebody's, doing a song and dance on you, you'll probably figure it out. And, there's a lot of that out there.
Those are my favorite people to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's for another episode. That's for the one we do late at night. Here's the next one. What do you see as common CMMS implementation mistakes, and how can those be avoided? I know there's a large list, but just go with what you typically see.
What we typically see is things being promised that cannot be delivered. Okay. So that's a big, just a generalized scenario where a customer has certain things that they'd like. Like we normally ask people, look, what are your needs and what are your nice to haves, right? And what are your wants? And all of that comes down to product or support or the process of implementation, whatever, right? A lot of times people are sold a bill of goods using maintenance language that they don't receive and therefore cannot leverage and do not understand how to apply. So that's a big one. The other big one is like, again, going back to just the fundamentals of it, is people don't know anything about their own business. If you don't know anything about your business, it's going to be very difficult for somebody, a CMMS provider, a consultant, or whatever, to come in the door and understand your business and provide you with an outcome that you want. You have to know your business. You have to understand the constraints. You have to understand the goals. You have to understand the way that information flows, the way that approvals flow, right? Who needs to be in the room, who doesn't need to be in the room. Those things are so important. You got to know your business, because I don't work for your business. My job is to understand your business as best as I possibly can, the way it's being communicated by all the stakeholders. Mm-hmm. And then we come up with ways to adapt and enable those processes and workflows and people to give them the best product that we can. So my recommendation is, don't fall for a bill of goods that you can't get. Make people prove it to you. If you do a discovery session with a CMMS company, make them prove everything that they're saying that they can do and ask them to apply it to your scenarios. Ask good questions. But also, you got to know the business. Right? It's not a one-way street. You have to know about your business as well. So that would be my short answer to another big question.
Yeah, and these are all big. These are all big, and we're just getting a nice little start, nice little taste here, and it helps people understand how they should be thinking. That's really what we're trying to do out here anyway. It's not really about software. It's about outcomes, and you'll hear that time and again. You're going to hear it next year, the year after, because that is the stuff. And then client by client, scenario by scenario, it changes. It kind of moves around, and you got to understand that. As a matter of fact, you brought up South Carolina, and one thing we've already talked about it here is when you're trying to, look at your processes and then the solution that you're going with, and those get changed too much. Sometimes people will show up and go, well, you're doing it all wrong. You got to do it like this because that's what they know and that's what they show. So we want to avoid that.
Well, I will say this again. And everybody listen, okay? There is no right or wrong if you are getting the outcomes that you are trying to get. If the business agrees with the way you are doing something and they are happy with, and the outcomes are what you want, and you're doing it some way, and someone comes along and says, that's the wrong way, tell them to pound sand, because you can't, that's not how this works. We can't just come into maintenance realms and tell people they're doing everything wrong and we have all the answers, when in reality, they could be getting the value that they need out of that thing that we think is wrong. It's not our place. That's why we need to talk to people. We need to understand things, right? And if you know, Greg, I've said this before, over the couple of years we've been together, knowing each other, is like, if you don't know what you're talking about, shut your mouth. Shut up.
It's pretty simple, right? It's pretty simple. What about when it comes to training your team on a new CMMS? What do you, because that's a big part of implementation success and can often cause failures. What do you got for us on that? Just quick snippet.
Okay. I'm going to say it from a leadership perspective. You need to know everything that they're going to need to know. If you are the standard, the bearer carrying the standard of what you would like to see in your department, you better be that thing. So if you want to implement a CMMS, you better know the CMMS. You better have the right questions to ask. You better know the perspectives of your team. If you don't know the perspectives of your team, you better bring them in and talk to them. You have to be the standard. You're a leader. You can't just say, I want a CMMS so I can do whatever. No. You say, I would like a CMMS because here is how it's valuable. Here is how it benefits my team. Here is how it benefits the business. Here how it benefits other departments. Like all of these things. And then you, as the leader, need to be the conduit of all those things. You need to paint the picture, whether good, bad, indifferent, whatever, to the team, to the business, to the decision maker. So it comes down to me, it comes down to leadership. You need to be, who said it? I think it was Gandhi. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Be the change you wish to see in your department. If you're a maintenance leader or an engineer or something and you want to CMMS and you're sitting on your ass barking at people from your chair, nope.
That ain't it.
Ain't going to happen. Get out there, know your job, know your team's job. And if you don't know, learn. There's humility in that, and there's trust building in that when you go to your lower level teammates and you say, hey, I've never done this. Give me the rundown on how this stuff works and how you're doing this and why is that? You will build a tremendous relationship with those people. If you don't do that and you just sit on your ass and you say, I'm the maintenance manager, this is what I do, you're jacked up.
I like it.
Leadership.
Straight up. Now, this one's, again, another big one when it comes to data migration. In your experiences, in your view, when someone has to kind of consider the data migration aspect of a CMMS implementation, whether they got data from an old system or whatever, or they're just pulling things together haphazard. We got some spreadsheets here and notes there. What's your advice there for someone to be more successful?
So, two things. I understand completely that there are a lot of people out there who don't have the data. And if they do have it, they're probably viewing it as not very concise and standardized, right? So it might be wildly different, like across the board. In those circumstances, I would say focus on important things, right? Transfer what is important. Quickly run through an asset hierarchy, talk to your operations group, your safety team, get under your belt what is important, what's critical, what is a must-have, Focus on those things, dump the best information you have in there, okay? And then take the opportunity. Look, data migration, in my opinion, is an opportunity. Whether you're going from an old CMMS to a new CMMS or no CMMS to a CMMS, it's an opportunity to standardize and verify. Now, you've got to it's a big thing to put your arms around. And if you don't have anything, or you believe everything you have is poor, focus on critical things. Focus on things that are super important to you, the business, and interdepartmentally, whatever it is. Get a list of the machines, the assets, the types of work or parts or whatever it is. Put that in there first, and then revise and optimize. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everything going in there's got to be pristine and perfect, and if it's not, you're going to no. That's all horseshit, right? You've got to get something under your belt. If the business agrees on it, the departments agree on it, get that in there. Start optimizing and focusing on that, and then build along as you go. The other thing is if you do have decent data, it goes back to the other thing I said, is that is a great opportunity for you to scrub and understand what is right, what is not working, how should we change the nomenclature, how should we whatever, right? So I always look at these as big opportunities, and to spend some time on them, particularly if you have all your fundamentals in place and you're standing on your 2 feet pretty well.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a couple things there that lead to where I was going next. One, when we talk about this data and, getting things in the way of asset hierarchies right, criticality, et cetera, there's preventive maintenance optimization, because a lot of times we're practicing these things in our environments to become a more reliable plant or whatever it might be. Maybe if you're not even practicing reliability, you want to be efficient and you want to do things, you want to see things, you want to know things that actually matter. You don't want a lot of things in there that are distractors. You don't want preventive maintenance items on things that don't exist anymore.
Well, you also don't, if you're migrating some data and you see some PMs in there that read like this, check bearing, look at belt, grease pulley. Those don't sound very valuable to me.
They lack specificity.
Cut, start over, something else, right?
Yeah. That's and another thing is through preventive maintenance planning or optimizing, you can start to figure out, you got that opportunity to figure out if it's been impactful, if you're overdoing it, if you're underdoing it.
Planning and scheduling is your biggest bang for buck, hands down. Anybody can argue and tell me AI or sensors or this or that. No. Planning and scheduling is by far your biggest bang for your buck, the most return. You stand to have the most impactful outcome from a structured and strategic planning and scheduling process that incorporates operational schedules. It creates trust and relationships amongst maintenance and operations and safety and quality and procurement. You're building just a massive system that will stand the test of time as people turn over and leave, right? That doesn't matter, right? All that stuff generally stays the same. Planning and scheduling is slept on by everybody because it's hard. It is hard. But when you take the time to do it, it will maximize so much of your production, so much of your planning or of maintenance, so much of everything. What's the saying where it's like an ounce of prevention is a whatever of, I don't know. But planning, whatever that thing is, planning and scheduling is the gold standard of that.
Yeah. And again, just for everyone, these are generalizations. We're hardly scratching the surface. And I'm going to close us out on one that this might set you off, Bryan. I think I know how you feel about this, but how is AI transforming CMMS platforms?
So I believe that there are AI tactics in CMMS that are going to be very beneficial for the end user. There are certain ones. And I believe the ones that are the most impactful are the ones that are going to impact the front line the most. I'm not talking about your maintenance manager. I'm not talking about some analytics guy. I'm not talking about all that stuff. I'm talking about the technician, the supervisor, and the planner and scheduler, or planner and a scheduler who are leveraging the system. I do believe that there are tools in place or that are being developed, some by UpKeep, right, that are going to be massively impactful to those people. Now, those tools are meaningless if you do not have a fundamental understanding and grasp of maintenance, of production, of your operation. So again, I know you saw my article on reliable. It goes back to that, right? It's like we need actual intelligence. I think Matt Knuth put it that way. We need actual intelligence and introspection and understanding and action from leadership and all of these things to drive a base so that AI can flourish. And I believe that without those things, you're going to get a really cool thing that you're not going to be able to leverage to its full potential.
Yeah.
And you're going to be upset about it.
I like it. This is an awesome rapid fire episode we've done. Bryan, thanks for being back on CMMS Radio.
Yeah, no problem, man.
This episode is sponsored by UpKeep, purpose-built for maintenance, reliability, and operations teams. Our mobile-first CMMS and asset operations management solution puts work orders, inventory, and asset info in the palm of your hand. Designed for ease of use and adoption, UpKeep aligns your team for peak business performance. Transform your operations. Transform your success with the multi-platform solution of UpKeep. Visit upkeep.com/CMMSradio to receive a dedicated custom discovery session. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.